Welcome to Her Imprint, part of the Impressions Exchange. I'm Denise Gustafson, your host. This podcast celebrates the remarkable women who are transforming the printing industry. We'll explore their journeys, from challenges to triumphs, and share the stories that leave a lasting imprint. Today, I am welcoming Susan Cilone. She's CEO of FastSigns of Louisville. So, Susan, welcome.
Thank you, Denise. I'm happy to be here.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. But to get us started, could you tell us a little bit about FastSigns of Louisville?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This year, we will celebrate 31 years in business.
Congratulations.
So it's an exciting milestone. And we work with a lot of construction projects. We work with a lot of customers in healthcare. That has guided our business to work on a lot of projects. And it could be a project where you have an entire hospital being built, and we're providing the signs inside, outside, on the building, in the parking lot.
Oh, wow.
Those projects are really exciting, and they involve a kind of a different approach where managing the project, keeping it moving forward is very much a part of what we do.
You're even doing the ADA signage within the building, so wayfaring.
We opened in 1994, and pretty quickly in 95, 96, we were fabricating ADA signs in-house. We found out later we were the first licensee of at that time, new system of applying Braille to signs, the raster Braille system that had been developed and come out. We're looking for a way to produce these signs in-house. We came upon this, became a licensee, and began using it for decades. And later we found out we were the first. I get excited when I look back at where we were and the groundbreaking processes that we started working with very early.
Are you still using that same system today?
We do. Of course, technology continues to evolve. Now, direct printing or direct to substrate printing is a big part of ADA signs today. We have a printer that will print the raised lettering and the Braille. And so it's similar to a 3D printer, but it's in a family of additive printing.
Okay.
So you're printing layer after layer to build it up to be raised at the height that you need. So we do a lot of that, but we still have multiple capabilities of producing Braille signs. We also use photopolymer processing to create a Braille sign that is one piece.
Okay.
And you might see that in a school where you want to make sure there's no way for kids to pick at the letter and or Braille and get it off of the sign. We also work with photopolymer in order to provide that type of sign. So
It's really cool. You think about a FastSigns sign franchise, you might not think about doing all of this really interesting and intricate work for ADA signage. You might think of banners and signs. You don't really think that this is such a big part of the business, but it's really interesting.
when I look back at that first year and a half that we were open, because we began working with healthcare, it shaped our path because we knew that they needed a lot of different types of signage between dimensional lettering, engraved type of signage, signs with tactile and braille. We began bringing in equipment to be able to service that industry. In healthcare, they need things quickly, very often. The changes that they make, either moving a certain department to another area in the hospital or redirecting traffic into a different entrance. Their needs are ongoing every week, every day. There's something that they need, some kind of messaging that they update. Because we began working so heavily in healthcare, it drove the type of equipment and type of processes that we brought in house so that we could control it and be responsive when they needed. I thought it was funny because I never dreamed that you could have a sign emergency. And
Thought of that, right?
I would think signs are never going to be an emergency. But when you work with healthcare, they can be
Mhm.
because they could need to move an entrance or doorway to an emergency room. And then the signage that directs traffic, whether it's the ambulance or the individual, you've got to make sure they know how do they get to that entrance, the
Mhm.
correct entrance. I began to give them a little bit of flexibility with the fact that they could need a sign in an emergency because the messaging is very important.
Yeah, it's
So,
so interesting. With a hospital, just imagining that the number of people that work in that building are going in and out of that building on a
right.
daily basis. They need to know where they're going. Even just on the employment side, they could have people coming and going. Several people every day could be leaving and joining the staff at the same time. So things, offices change, things
Yeah,
change. And then I'm sure with COVID, that was probably a whole thing because that was also almost an emergency sign situation with
exactly.
directing and all the stuff that was going on with that.
Because what you saw was they were updating policy as the virus was evolving.
Mhm.
So they would limit the number of visitors. Now we've got to make it very clear at the entrance, at the sign in, that we're only allowing 2 visitors. And then it became 1. And
Mhm.
then it became no visitors can come in. And so there might be a weekly or every other day during some parts of the pandemic update to their policy. Their masking policy would get updated over time. And then you have kind of the things that we all think about, the distancing, where they want people to stand.
Mhm.
They, at one point, one of the hospitals built a tunnel entrance made from plywood, and we put graphics on that. They were attempting to elongate an outdoor entrance that would give more opportunity for distancing or other kind of things to handle the influx of traffic and people coming into the ERs.
Mhm.
So those kind of things were constant throughout the pandemic.
Yeah, and just kind of thinking about it now, there's a measles outbreak in Texas. So what those hospitals are now having to do, again,
Right.
maybe not to the same degree as what happened with COVID, but obviously there's changes in policies, there's changes in how things are being addressed in the healthcare field in Texas right now.
Exactly.
I'm sure
Exactly.
somebody that services those accounts have a sign emergency going on right now.
Yes. Right. Exactly.
So I have to ask, you've been with Fast Signs for 31 years, you've opened this business. Is that what you were looking to do when you started? What made you come into printing in the first place?
It's interesting because I went through school, finished a degree in secondary education, and then went on to an advanced master's degree in clinical psychology. I'm teaching at a university, counseling, teaching career counseling was one of the courses I taught. And 5 years into the life that I thought, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life, I cared about helping people. I was very interested in understanding people, behavior, all of that. Teaching, it was what I thought I would do for the rest of my life. And at that point, we moved away from Louisville after going through college in Eastern Kentucky. So we had a couple of friends who had opened a Fast Signs franchise. We began talking with them, and I liked the idea of helping my husband open a business that he could run and maintain. And I love the idea of being able to come back to Louisville. The location opportunity was in Louisville, and I thought this would be great. Come back near family, be able to help my husband open a business. He always had that dream. My husband's background was engineering, design in HVAC. And so when we opened, of course, from the ground up, no customers, it is open the doors and hope that, you
Someone
know,
walks in.
know what you're doing. Yeah. And somebody walks in. And it was a lot of work. I performed every role. Sam is my husband. He became the outside sales. And so he would hit the ground every day. He's gone. I'm at the center making everything happen. And so I was a designer, I was sales, I was all things accounting. And then as we began to have more team members, I'm managing them, I'm training, I'm learning products. Again, I'm there making everything happen behind the scenes. Over time, we developed a good way of operating a business where you have to do so much, where he would do what he's good at, I would do what I'm good at. And I found at a few years in that I loved this. I enjoyed everything about being creative. I enjoyed everything about running a business, learning how to do that. I began doing accounting, which I had never done, and bookkeeping and accounting and learning financials and learning again over time. I was the one who would develop the business plan. I'm the one who was setting the goals, and not only setting them, but excited when they came to be, when the reality, when you met that goal, when you achieved. The other thing, I thought I would return to teaching. I thought I'll step out, let him continue on with this. But at some point, I realized what I love about teaching is helping, is training. there's so much overlap. In our business, I was teaching every day in training. I was probably unusual in that I would give new employees quizzes on material. And I thought, oh, I'll make it fun. I'll give you prizes or gift cards. I knew how to teach.
Mhm.
It was important that they learn product knowledge, that they learn steps, procedures, and all of that. So at one point, I thought, I don't have to go back to a classroom to be doing what I care about, what I'm passionate about, which is helping people and helping and teaching. The other thing is, I never thought I would ever go into sales. So remember, I taught career counseling, so I knew how to pull together interests and personality and values and look at what career you might enjoy. And I thought, I would never be a salesperson. That wouldn't fit me. But I found myself in that role. But I approached it differently. Again, I'm looking at how do I help solve a problem? How do I help the customer find the right solution? My approach to sales might be very different. And I tend to be the team member that one of my team members will bring in to consult, to find the right product, and to find a creative solution. Because being creative is probably my greatest passion, to be able to be creative and to be able to look at a solution that we provided and know the steps we took to get there. And I get just absolutely giddy when I see it on the building or in the room or on the wall, the finished product. So I realized that just like I had taught in career counseling, there are different careers that might fit all of the things that make up your interests. And values become an important part too in career counseling. What's important to you?
Mhm.
And at one point, I thought, I'm not going back to teaching. I enjoy what I'm doing, I'm good at it. And this is something that I'm really proud of what I've built and the impact that I've made. So that was a shift, I think. And Sam continued on with sales being his primary role. He's very good with engineering, so he can help figure out how are we going to put this complicated sign type on a building that how do we get there? Are we coming off the roof or putting scaffolding on the side of the building? He understands engineering and building. He works very much in that, which he
Mhm.
loves, and in sales. And it turns out running a business is not something that he had a whole lot of passion for. And so I became more and more the person who worked on the business. There are times where I kind of have to stop him and say, let me go over our goals for you because I've got these worked out. Need you to be on board with those
Yeah,
goals.
we're getting too many companies that you're doing in this type of business. If something happens, that's bad. We need to diversify. We need to move
Right.
into other businesses. Let's take a look at these for a little bit. But yeah, that's amazing and really interesting for
Mm,
how that change happened for you. What
yeah.
was it like literally just stopping your career, basically leaving that and starting a business? That was probably a little nerve-wracking, to say the least.
Yeah. There was a lot of emotion. I had a great job. I had a group of people that I worked with that I thought that I would be friends with them for my entire life. They were so supportive. So you're in a counseling center setting, and everyone is practically around you as a psychologist. So you have an extremely strong support system of people who are amazing and intelligent and just a wonderful setting. So I'm leaving that. I'm leaving everything that I had spent all my years in higher education working towards. I'm putting on hold at that point. I had begun working part time on a doctorate to become potentially the director of that counseling center. So I'm leaving that. We had our son in that year. So I have an infant. I'm moving at
Let's
one
just
point.
layer all the
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. And so, in order to open a business, we decided we would move back in with my parents,
Mhm.
an infant, couldn't take my dog. So, we were rehoming our dog. And yeah, there was a lot. And then
Yeah.
all of the change of, do I know what I'm doing? Is this
Was this the right decision?
so quite a lot of emotions,
Oh, yeah.
and it began to happen really quickly once we began to move toward opening. Went to training. My son turned a year old during our 3-week training in Dallas. So my sister flew him in so we could see him on his birthday. When we were going through training, in Dallas, we had a hard time. It was over Derby weekend. So we realized when you leave Louisville, the whole world doesn't care about the Derby like we do. So we had a hard time finding a way to watch the Derby on TV while we were going through training. Finally, we located a TV in one of the training rooms, found a channel, and watched the Derby. But there was so much going on.
Mhm.
And I think the good news is we were so busy. I didn't have time to really absorb all the
You didn't
emotion.
have time to panic?
We hit the ground running and we didn't look back. We knew we were both going to work really hard.
Mhm.
We were both from our former jobs, the type who would take on responsibilities that weren't even assigned to us.
Mhm.
By the time I left the counseling center, I was writing the annual report, which is typically written by the director, and he gets help with the typing, but he's writing that annual report, which is forecasting plans for the future as well as detailing statistics of. I was writing the entire thing by the time I left because I became involved in it, and before I knew it, I knew more than anyone else. So we tend to approach work that way. We take it all on and we work very hard. So that probably kept me from being more emotional because
Mhm.
I was very busy.
Yeah, to say the least. And
Yeah.
it's interesting too, you left that career, you had that plan,
Right.
what you were gonna do. Your husband wanted to start something, he wanted to start a business, you guys wanted to move back home,
Hmm.
and it's just interesting too because in many cases, you were doing this in support of your husband. He
Yeah.
wanted to start
Yeah.
the business. But it's also interesting that you were really the one that
Yeah.
became the business versus him. He ended up doing the sales,
Yeah.
especially in the printing or the sign industry. A lot of those people in the positions that you hold as a CEO were guys, were men.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's just interesting that how that changed and shifted. Basically, it was based on your skills and ability and what your
Mhm.
interests were. That must have been a little bit intimidating as well for you, especially starting out. You're in a way alone with a whole bunch of guys.
Yeah, agreed. And I think I had to evolve throughout that because what I ended up finding is I'm focused on what we're building.
Mhm.
I'm focused on learning everything I can, getting more knowledge, more understanding of not only our products and processes and equipment, but also understanding business and being able to wrap my arms around the fact that I need to understand financials. I need to understand how to read financials, how to understand them, how to utilize that to make goals and continue to build the strength of the business. One of the things I think is important to understand about me, I was pretty comfortable with being behind the scenes
Mhm.
and Sam being extroverted.
He's gonna be the one talking to everybody.
He's the
Yeah.
face. Yeah. Over time, I think that also lent the impression that he is the business
Mhm.
and they hadn't met me.
Yeah.
I can think of numerous times where someone would come in to the center and they would look for the owner, Sam. How do they speak to the decision maker, Sam? And they're looking right by me, at the person who, at the end of the day, I'm probably the one making that decision.
Yeah.
And I run into that again and again where I meet with them, talk with them, and unless I pointedly tell them I'm the decision maker,
Yeah. I'm the
they
one that's writing the check for you.
yeah, at first I wasn't quite sure how do I handle those situations.
Mhm.
I tend to have a softer voice, quieter, grew up in a family with older brothers who at the dinner table, I'm just going to say, they monopolize the conversation.
Mhm.
It's difficult to get a word in.
Yeah.
And they're very intelligent, they're funny, they're interesting. They would carry the conversation. I'm more introverted than they are, so I'm okay with that. I would have an occasional moment where I might interject something funny, but I let them carry that.
Mhm.
So growing up and even throughout school and everything, I'm more quiet. So I wasn't used to having to project my voice. So literally and figuratively, my voice became something that over time I had to begin to figure out how do I use my voice to stand up, to speak out,
Mhm.
to have a role in decision making that might be outside of my business. It was something I think that I personally needed to work on.
Mhm.
I remember a time when I had a lot of opinions, and I'm reaching out to the founder of our franchise. And this was a moment where he's stepping down and we're going to have leadership change.
Mhm.
And I had a lot of opinions, and I had a lot of opinions both about where we had been and where we're going. So I sent him an email and just because I tend to express well written,
Mhm.
or verbal. So I sent him an email, and it was as if I had bombarded him with every opinion I had for 15 years. And he's, wait, okay. But he was very patient. He listened. And then he offered guidance, as he often did.
Mhm.
Basically, you have a voice. It's in the National Advertising Council that I helped put in place. It is in the Franchise Advisory Council. You have a way to make a difference and bring those opinions forward. But first, I think I was struggling with his departure and wanting him to fix everything. But I took that to heart and I realized he's right. I've got to find a way to speak, to have a voice, to be able to be in the room where it happens,
Mhm.
as I say. I did run for a board. I served multiple terms and I did find a way to get my voice in the room, sharing my opinions. And I'm the type of person, I don't speak unless I think it's important.
Mhm.
I am more quiet. But when I have something important to say, it was important for me to find that path
Yeah.
to be able to say it. I also, at that time, noticed there were not very many females represented on those very boards. Here's our opportunity to have input
To make a
and
difference in some
not
way.
being,
Yeah.
yeah, and we're not being represented. And I felt that was very important. It was another reason why I need to be in the room, because I do think I have a perspective as a female owner. I do think I have something important and valuable to say. And I look back at the opportunities that I took to speak. Yeah, it's a little less comfortable
Mhm.
for me, but I feel really positive about and proud of the change in direction that I know I helped implement. It taught me that even though you may have insecurities, vulnerabilities, whatever it may be about your voice, that finding a way, finding a path to be able to speak and provide that input can not only be a positive for you, but you, you have an opinion, you have a perspective. Your voice matters. So, getting out of my own way, I think that was a lesson that I learned.
Mhm.
I may not be able to control a lot of things. It is more difficult to have that voice in that room. I may not be able to control the number of times that on those board meetings, I'm sitting there with men similarly to the dinners growing up with my brothers. These are very articulate men. They like to talk and they could take over the conversation in those meetings.
Mhm.
And there were times I had to push to make sure that my voice was heard in that room. I think it was important to me because there were things that I could control. And running for that board, I can control that. Speaking, bringing my voice into that room, I can control that. Over time, when you realize you know what you're doing, you understand products, you understand technology. I never dreamed that I would be the one making decisions on which printer we would purchase. I think I thought Sam will do that,
Yeah.
decide what printer we buy. And that's not true. I've decided every major equipment purchase almost completely without his input in the last 15 years. I understand what our needs are. I understand what our goals are. I understand what I value in our capabilities.
Mhm.
So I'm making those decisions. I had to learn how to get out of my own way because I had certain biases about what role I would play and could play. And over time, I have a confidence that I'm perfectly capable of doing things and don't now at all rely on going to a man or my husband or whoever it might be to get that answer and to feel comfortable there. So,
And it's interesting that you say you not only had to get out of your own way, but you also had to realize your own biases in order
yeah,
to overcome them.
yes, yes. This is strange to me because I had an epiphany, and it was probably 15 years ago or maybe longer. I tend to be very inward thinking,
Mhm.
thoughtful, work things out, think them through, write them out. And I found myself in trying to grasp some kind of current events and cultural events and everything. I found myself saying, as a precursor to a monologue in my own head, I found myself saying, I'm not a feminist, but, and I said, what? What does that mean? Why do I need to lead any conversation with, I'm not a feminist,
But
but. So I really had to break that down. And I realized because I've been indoctrinated to think that's a bad thing. So I've got to get that out of the way.
Mhm.
Get you to understand I'm not a feminist because I know you might think they're wacko, or you might think, and I said, whoa, no, why? No, you do not have to declare that or stipulate that, because what are you saying there? And what is being a feminist? You're wanting equality, social, economical, political equality for women. There's nothing bad about that.
Mhm.
There's nothing to apologize for, and you don't have to be a closeted. I
Yeah.
felt like, am I a closeted feminist? But I realized, even though I felt like I'd come from a family who I think is very supportive, a father and a mother who supported me 100%. I could do anything. According to my mother, I can do absolutely anything. It didn't really come from home, but somewhere along the way, I believed the narrative that, yeah, but if you're standing up like that and you're picketing, whatever you want to go, you are, yeah, you're just
Mhm.
doing too much. And I also thought we wouldn't even have to have the conversation if there hadn't been some restrictions placed on our rights
Mhm.
and abilities to be equal. So I really had to grapple with that. I can remember even talking with people and saying, I can't believe that was part of the narrative in my mind and that I hadn't questioned it. I had to move beyond that and I had to think about what that means, where it came from, and then where you go with that. So I no longer feel the need to say, I'm not a feminist. That to me was part of the process that I needed to go through to begin to, I think, feel confident enough
Mhm.
in steps that I could take that would be helpful for women in leadership. And I very much support women in leadership roles. And I'm excited to encourage and support them. There are more challenges that we face. While the days I think are fewer that I'll get someone to come in and look over me trying to find Sam
Mhm.
to get the decision making answer, it still happens. And it hasn't been that long where I had contracted a vendor to do something as a part of our move. And every time I spoke with them, I called to set it up. Every time I spoke with him, he said, "We'll ask Sam. Let's find out what Sam wants."
As if you're just the
I,
admin making the
I
phone call.
exactly.
Yeah.
I about the third time that I heard that, and I said, "I want to make sure and introduce myself to you," and told him, and I said, "So in addition to being Sam's wife, which he knew Sam's, I said, I'm also his boss." And I did a little lightheartedly, but I thought this is important for me because at that point too, we're getting ready to sign a contract on it. And I'm the one who will sign that contract. So it was important that I just make sure, however I do it, that he realizes I have the authority. Let's go to my office and I'll sign the contract and we'll get this moving. But it brought up to me again a need for me to feel comfortable with, let me tell you who I am. Because rather than do I let this, whatever led to you thinking, I don't have the authority, I don't have the decision making, whatever, I need to just speak
Mhm.
again. It's my voice. I need to make sure that I do something. It ended in a very nice conversation. I don't think there was any ill whatever. There was, I think, on his part, an assumption that I didn't have the authority,
Mhm.
and that we need to go somewhere else to get that.
It is interesting. Like you said, it's happening less
Yeah.
over the years, but it's still happening. And I think that's a bigger conversation about how do we fix that? Because I think that I think is something that we can't tackle in a very short podcast.
Exactly. I think we don't fix it all, and we realize that, but we make progress along the way.
Mhm.
And I think one thing that we haven't maybe touched on yet is supporting each other
Yeah, it's important.
in finding ways to help each other kind of navigate those different challenges. And there's so many ways we can do that. And part of it, I think the number of women leadership organizations, I feel really positive about that. The number of opportunities that you have when you meet other women in leadership roles through organizations, that is a good way to get the support, to have the conversations like this, where you're talking through some things and figuring out how to navigate it.
Because you're both struggling with those same things. It could be in different
Right.
parts of the country, but you have similar struggles.
Yeah, exactly.
So, as we're wrapping up, my favorite question that I ask is knowing what you know now, so building the business from the ground up, all the things you had to learn, all the experiences that you've had over the years. If you were just starting out today, what advice would you give yourself?
I think it would be important for me to include something about being comfortable with my voice.
Mhm.
I think that so much of what I did, I would do again in terms of embracing and learning. So I think the message would include encouragement to approach it similar to the way you approach school, where you're learning, you're gaining knowledge in all aspects to be successful. But I think the voice, understanding maybe sooner that
Mhm.
I do have important perspective. I do have confidence in my capabilities
Mhm.
to be able to use my voice. I think the other thing I would say is take more time off and give myself a break.
Mhm.
And pushing hard every day, you hear people say it, and I heard it so often. There's going to come a time where you realize how difficult, how hard to be that driving for that long. You do need to give yourself a break. You do need to build in those vacations, times off, that kind of thing. I think that was something that was inevitable given our approach that we
Mhm.
were err in that way. But I think you realize that when you get older, when you get a little bit more tired, that break would have been helpful.
Yeah, because 'cause you're putting so much of yourself into the business. You have to step back to let you recharge and refill that you're
Right.
drawing from.
Yeah, you do. You do. You do. And it's that message of take care of yourself.
Mhm.
And that is one that you hear it and you don't listen in the way that you could that would help.
That's hindsight in some cases.
Right? Exactly.
Susan, it was an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and I think we could have gone on a lot longer too.
I know.
But so
Thank
thank you
you.
so much for spending some time with me today.
Thank you. And thank you for all that you do and putting together conversations like this. I really appreciate you taking the time to make those available.
Oh, thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. Thank you for joining us on this journey to celebrate and amplify the voices of women in the printing industry. If you have a story to share or know someone whose journey deserves to be highlighted, we'd love to hear from you. Together, let's continue inspiring and empowering the next generation of leaders. Until next time, keep leaving your imprint. This is Her Imprint. See you soon.